and welcome to another exciting episode. Till now, we have created a Stripe user. Now, we want to ensure that user state is accessible globally in our project. And we can do that by making use of React context and providers. Using React context, we can create global variables that are available throughout our Next.js application. To get the state of our Supabase user when our application loads, we will be making use of supabase.auth.user functionality. So first thing that we need to do is create a context. To do that, we'll be heading over to our code, and here we'll be creating a new directory. We'll be calling it as the context, and within that we will be making use of a new file, and we'll call it as user, since we are talking about user context over here. So we'll say user.js, and within this, the first thing that we need to do is we'll be importing a couple of things. We'll be requiring create context, use state, use effect, and use context from the React library. We'll be also requiring Supabase because we need to fetch information from our profile table. So we'll say import Supabase from utils, and we'll be also requiring router. So we'll make use of use router from next router. After this, we'll be creating our context using the context equals create context. After this, we'll be creating our provider, since this is the context provider that we are trying to develop. And within this provider, we'll have children as the input, and we'll be making use of our router using use router, and we'll be also setting up our user using the supabase.auth.user. So here we are using user state supabase.auth.user, and once that's done, the next thing that we will be taking up is making use of the use effect. Now under use effect, we'll be syncing the user profile. Within this, we'll be first of all getting the user profile information from supabase.auth.user. And to do that, we'll be creating a constant, and here within this, we'll be making use of the session user, and that will have the supabase.auth.user. Now, once that's done, we'll again go ahead and utilize Supabase profile table. And that we will do by ensuring whether the session user exists or not. So here we'll say if session user, then we will go inside this, and we will be retrieving the information from the Supabase profile table based on the ID parameter of this session user. So here, if the session user exists, then we are calling Supabase from profile select all, where ID is equal to the ID of the logged in user, and we are fetching only one record. Once we have that information, we'll be setting the user using these two things. So we'll set user using session user and profile information. And the profile, as you can see, we're getting from the Supabase callback. Once that's done, it's time now to call this get user profile. And we'll do that over here just after the get user profile has been defined. After that, we'll be also updating this whenever user state changes. So on auth state change, that is when we are logging in or logging out, this needs to get called, and we are tracking it using the on auth state change. So we have all the required code piece now and a use effect. We also need to have the login and logout functionality moved over here. So what we'll do now is we'll be creating the login over here. So we'll say supabase.auth.signin provider as GitHub and logout as well. So if you see under pages, we had this login and logout. So what I'm going to do now is we'll be just copying this line of code from here, putting it over here. Similarly, we'll be doing the same thing for logout as well. Instead of login, we'll say logout. And here we'll go to logout and we'll be taking up these two lines. And over here we'll be setting the same. Along with this, we'll be also setting up the user to null. Now, once we have the login over here in our context provider as well as logout functionality, the next thing that we need to do is have a constant which captures all these three things together. So we have user, login, logout. And finally, we'll return our context provider with the children parameter that is being passed over here. So we are returning our context provider over here. The value, as you can see, is exposed. So it's going to contain user login and logout, and we have the children as well. Finally, we'll be making use of the use context, and here we have use user, and then we'll be exporting our default provider. Once we have this, the next thing that we need to do is go to our app.js file. So here on the pages, we'll be creating a new file, underscore app.js. Now within this file, we'll be importing the user provider from context user, and we'll have our my app created over here with the user provider and then all the components over here. Once that's done, we'll be heading over to our id.js page, and over here we'll be including or importing the use user from context user file. And here you can see we are just making use of the use user function and then logging the user over here. Now let's go ahead and run this application. And in browser, you can see we are getting the ID of the user as well as the Stripe customer that we created from the profile table. The only change that we need to make is make use of the updated method over here. So it's superbase.auth.getUser instead of user. So that's how we make use of global context to access user information across the application.